your interest is to get the vendor as soon as possible to the PPC stage, because you'll have him committed. You'll have him committed to the level where if he does pull out, he'll have a big penalty. And normally we don't see vendors pull out from a 10% arras because they need to pay a big penalty. You're looking to buy a property in Spain. If you've just started your journey, well, you're going to be doing a lot of research, and that's what our High Homes YouTube channel is all about. We're going to break down very complex things into very simple, manageable information so you guys can know how to buy a property in Spain, navigate the real estate market correctly. And today we're going to be talking about the 3 steps of buying a property in Spain. I'm going to go in a bit of depth on every single stage. So before we go into the steps, I want to start by talking about, the normal sort of journey that occurs with buyers that are, non-residents, buyers, international buyers coming to Spain. No matter where you're buying, the first thing you do is obviously get in touch with a local agency, or you'll start navigating, you'll start, checking out different areas, suburbs, you'll get to scout, do some trips and understand where you want to be. But at some point, you're going to be finding that perfect property. And when you find that perfect property, that's when our sort of 3 steps explainer video makes sense. So what are the steps in order to purchase a property? Well, the first one is to reserve a property. And that's step number 1. And this is what we call the reservation. Now, what is the reservation? I'm going to explain that to you in very simple terms. The reservation is a very simple document that is prepared normally by the agency, and it can be prepared by the vendor or the lawyer. And it's normally a 1 or 2 page document that outlines the most simple terms of the agreement. It will outline, the name of the vendors, the name of the buyers, you yourself. It will outline, the price of the property and some really simple conditions, such as, what's included, what's not included. But it won't go into any sort of depth. It's a very simple document. It's a document that holds some weight, but doesn't hold the weight of the next documents or next contracts we're going to be talking about. It's a very simple one. This reservation contract is normally signed, and with that signature is a payment of what we call a reservation fee. Now, what is that reservation fee? Well, it depends where you're buying in Spain. It depends what you're buying. The more expensive the property, the higher the reservation fee. But on average, you normally pay a reservation of 6,000 to 10,000 euros. It's true that if you're buying, upper segment market, luxury properties, reservation fees can be 50 to 100,000 euros. But for the general market, we're looking at 6,000 to 10,000 euros. So the normal sort of process is you find the property, and as a buyer, you want to be sort of signing this reservation as soon as possible, because that takes the property off the market. And that's what the reservation does. It takes the property off the market, and it outlines the very simple terms of the transaction and timeline. That's very important. The reservation also outlines the timeline. By when will you be completing? By when will you be making the next payments? So that's the reservation fee. It's your way as a buyer or as a seller to take the property off the market. Just think about this. You've got a very small level of commitment from both sides. It's not a huge private contract we're going to talk about in a moment. It's a very simple commitment between the vendor and the buyer. Let's keep on going. That's what it is. So you've signed the reservation and you've paid the reservation. Congrats. Your step number 1 is normally done. Now, what comes next? Let me tell you about it. What comes next is this, the PPC, the private purchase contract. And although it's true that sometimes people go straight from reservation to title deed, which is the ultimate last step, some people just go straight from reservation to title deed, and that's absolutely fine. But normally, most transactions will involve this figure, the PPC, the private purchase contract. And that's a contract that's an intermediary contract between both sort of initial stage and final stage, because you normally need a longer timeline. If you're buying with a mortgage, for example, we're going to be talking about a 2 months or 3 months timeline, and a vendor will not have a property off the market for such a long time on a small commitment, or on a 6,000 or 10,000 reservation fee, because it's not enough level of commitment from the buyer. What happens here is that you're going to be signing a private purchase contract, and normally you'll be paying let me just put it in blue so you can see it, a 10% of the purchase price. That is what is paid at the moment of PPC. Now, When you pay that 10%, you normally pay that to the vendor or to one of the lawyers involved, but normally it's the vendor. And this 10% is the big sort of commitment from the buyer. So if the buyer pulls out, he will lose this 10%. Now, as for the vendor, if you pull out, there's different things that can happen because there's two contracts or two kind of private purchase contracts in Spain. The first one is a contrato de arras, okay? And in the event of a vendor signing a PPC of arras, what will happen is if the vendor pulls out for a reason that's basically attributable to the vendor needs to pay the buyer 10% back plus an additional penalty of 10%, so double what he's received. So as a buyer, your interest is to get the vendor as soon as possible to the PPC stage because you'll have him committed. You'll have him committed to the level where if he does pull out, he'll have a big penalty. And normally we don't see vendors pull out from a 10% arras because they need to pay a big penalty. That's not the only kind of PPC. You have also un contrato de opción. And you can make this contract sort of an obligation of fulfillment on both sides. That's something the lawyers can put into the conditions. What else do you need to know about the PPC? Well, the PPC is a very big contract because it outlines absolutely everything regarding the process of the purchase. It outlines everything from what's included, what's not included. Most importantly, the date by which the notary needs to be signed, which notary is going to be used, and everything regarding urbanistic sort of checks. It also has all the information regarding all the land registry, information, making sure that it's sold free of any sort of debt. And it outlines specific conditions in a lot more depth than the reservation contract. So in very simple terms, a reservation contract is a 2-page document. A private purchase contract is normally a 10, 15-page document that outlines everything. In both cases, both the reservation and the private purchase contract need to outline a specific timeline. It always will have a max date by which you need to complete. So this is step 2, the private purchase contract. And in Spanish lo llamamos el contrato privado de compra-venta. And just to recap again, it can be of arras, where the vendor will have to pay you double if they back out. You as a buyer will lose your 10% if you back out. And then you've got the contrato de opción de compra, which is a different one. But this is the one that's most normally always signed. So guys, you've got the vendor, or you are a vendor, you're a buyer, you've got to the reservation stage, then within 2 weeks normally you sign the private purchase contract. That's normally the timeline. And then what happens after the private purchase contract is signed? Because at this moment you don't have a property. You don't own the property. If you're the buyer, you don't own the property. If you're the vendor, you haven't sold the property. You've signed a commitment for something to happen down the line, right? And this is what it's all about. The most important step, the title deed. We call it in Spanish the Escritura. And the Escritura is the title deed, and it's signed in front of a notary. A notary is a public figure. It's, let's say, someone that works for the state that confirms that the people that are coming in front of them signing are the people, in fact, that, should be, right? So he makes sure that the identities of the vendor and the buyer are those that appear in the land registry, appear in the identification card of the person sitting down in front of him. But the notary, in fact, is the person that signs off the agreement at the end. It's a third party that just confirms what's being signed, it's what's being signed. And this is where ownership is constituted. And it's really important to understand that. This is where, the moment you sign the title deed that will outline everything and you'll make the final payment, so, whatever the balance was for the vendor, that's when you'll pay it, right? At this moment, when you exchange the money and you sign the title deed, that's the moment you become the new owner of the property, and that's the moment the vendor officially has sold the property. And why do I say that? Because once the deed is signed, it needs to be sent over to the land registry. But that's declarative. What I mean by that is that this is the constitutive moment of the transaction. In the moment you sign the title deed, even though it's not registered at the land registry, which is the next step, it's already your property. This is what constitutes you being the owner. And this is where everything happens. You sign, you pay, where, in the case you're buying with a mortgage, this is where your bank will come in and lend you the money and also register the debt on the property. Everything happens here. And when you sign title deed, you should be walking out the notary with the keys. You have the possession and the ownership and everything done in one-stop shop. Congratulations, if you've signed title deed, you are the official owner of the property. Now, those are the 3 simple steps: reservation, private purchase contract, and the title deed. So if you're a buyer entering market now, what you need to be doing in your negotiation, or what you need to be doing when you're talking to a vendor, is to get them as fast as possible to this moment. So as you sort of scale, or you go up the ladder, you go up the commitment ladder. So reservation, remember, very little commitment. PPC, a lot of commitment, right? Where the vendor is penalized in case he pulls out. And then ultimately you sign title deed and you are the owner. And again, the next step is to take that title deed to the land registry and register it, because the land registry is sort of the declarative stage where, you know, for public records, that you will be known as the owner. So that is it. Those are the 3 steps in buying a property in Spain. Super simplified, but very, very real, and exactly how it is. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. And it's a perfect moment to ask you guys to like this video if you found it useful. If you did. If you don't find it useful, don't press the like button. If you did, please do. And if you have any questions for us or our team, comment those below. Anything that you think I missed, anything that you think I should add, or any questions you might have, go ahead and include those below. Now, for those of you which are new to the High Homes YouTube channel, you never come across our content before, well, you've come to a place where we produce content every single week. News about Spain, property news, real estate, information, lifestyle and Costa Sol, absolutely everything. So if that sounds really good and you want to stay posted with information just like this, explainer videos, etc., 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 and so many good interviews with experts of the market, mayors, lawyers, architects, click that button and subscribe to the High Homes YouTube channel so we can make sure to keep you guys posted with the best of the best. So with this 3-step video finished, I need to tell you guys, see you soon.